Thanks so much. It's so great to be here. Whenever I'm here, I'm reminded that youth is wasted on the young. It would be impossible for students to fully absorb how fortunate they are to be in just such an incredible setting and such an incredible time in our history, and at the epicenter of, I think, the greatest changes in humanity. To be in Paris in the 20s or New York in the 80s, we're going to tell our grandkids, and our kids are going to tell their kids about what it was like to live here at this time now. So it's sort of overwhelming to come back and think about how fortunate we are and recognize that there's no way students can understand how fortunate they are. So I'm going to talk about the focus of my research at Stern is on how traditional industry is disrupted by technology. And I've written a book called The Four, The Hidden DNA of Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google. And I don't believe these companies I think they're underestimated in terms of actually how much influence and economic power they've aggregated. We know they're great companies, we know they're super successful, but I don't really think we fully appreciate just how dominant they become. So I'm going to take you through some views on how they've gotten so dominant, and then some lessons or some what I believe are uncomfortable questions that we're not asking enough, although it seems to be we're asking more of them just in the last 90 days. So how do you get to be a company that has 1 billion people in your franchise? Or how do you build an organization that has a meaningful relationship with 1 billion people? And this is the first and last slide in every class I teach, and I've taught now 6,350 students at Stern, or as I like to remind them about, I've created about $34 million in free cash flow. So to understand a business that needs to be big, you need to understand instinct. And these companies, I believe, all tap directly into a very primal instinct. So let's start with Google. Since our species sort of emerged from caves, we've needed a super being. Our competitive advantage of a species is the size of our brain. That's why babies are expelled kind of prematurely, because the brain gets too big. And our brain is robust enough to ask very complicated questions. How does space end? How can someone as awesome as me die? How can there be so much suffering in a world with so many resources? But our brain, unfortunately, isn't robust enough to answer them, so we have consistently adopted a super being, or the notion that there's some power above us that we can pray to, and it will have some sort of divine intervention because this super being sees everything and spit back some sort of answer or guidance. Anyone who has children has prayed or thought, will my kid be all right? You have your planet of stuff, you have your planet of work, you have your planet of friends, and if something goes wrong with one of your kids, the whole universe shrinks to your planet of children. Will my kid be all right? Symptoms and treatment of croup. We now turn to the super being known as Google for divine intervention. We don't know how it's doing this, to answer our prayers. A prayer is just a question you throw up into the universe, hoping for some sort of processing power that spits back an answer you trust. 1 in 6 queries presented to Google have never been asked before in the history of mankind. What priest, scholar, rabbi, professor, coach, or mentor has so much credibility that 1 in 6 questions posed to that person have never been asked before in the history of mankind? Think for a moment, really absorb your name and your face above everything you have typed into the Google query box. And you're going to fast figure out you trust Google more than any other person or individual with your private information. I think it's a safe assumption that every organization everywhere will be eventually hacked. And if you want to talk about true social chaos, think about your boss, your business partners, your spouses seeing everything you have typed into Google, and then layer on top of it some artificial intelligence that indicates your fetishes, whether you're thinking about divorce, whether you're thinking about starting a new company with or without your partners, what diseases you're worried about, what diseases you're worried about exposing yourself to at that moment. We would have literally social chaos because we trust Google more than any other entity in the world, and Google is our modern man's God. Let's move further down the torso. One of the wonderful things about our species is we not only need to be loved. Kids with poor nutrition but good affection have better outcomes than kids with good nutrition but poor levels of affection. We also need to love others. New mothers do not die. When your parents move in with you, your life expectancy goes up 2 to 3 years. The physical and mental act of caring for other people extends your life. And it's easy to see why. Our brain is a low-grade security camera watching everything you do and making a decision around how much value you're adding to society. When you sweat, you can fool the brain into thinking you're hunting prey or building housing. You get to live longer. When you're mentally very stimulated, you fool the brain into thinking you're helping the village elders figure out things for the clan, and you live longer. The act of caring for others, logically, is the most important thing you can do for the species. And so the physical act releases a hormone that clears out the bad cholesterol, and you live longer. The fastest growing demographic group in America over the next 30 years will be centenarians. There's about 10,000 of them now. It's growing to 500,000. We're all going to have people aged 100 in our lives. I see a young man here today. This young man has a life expectancy of 100 years. If you're born into an affluent society, the life expectancy is now 100 years of age. For people our age, the strongest signal of whether we'll make it to triple digits is 3 things. Number 3 are genetics. Genetics are less important than we think. We like to think they're number 1 so we can abuse our bodies and think, oh, the die have been cast. They haven't. If Uncle Joe lived to 95 and smoked 3 packs a day, you should not take that much comfort in it. But if your parents passed away in their 50s, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to pass away in your 50s. Genetics are less important than we would like to think. Number 2 is lifestyle. In sum, don't be obese, don't smoke, and you screen out somewhere between 40 and 60% of early cancer and early cardiovascular ailments. But the number 1 signal of whether or not you're going to make it to 100 is, simply put, how many people in your life do you love? How much caretaking are you responsible for? It's a nice notion, and I believe Facebook is tapping into this need to love others, mostly through imagery that creates greater empathy and reinforces and catalyzes our existing relationships and expands our circle of love, if you will. It is helping us caregive at scale. Moving further down the torso. Throughout the history of our species, the number 1 killer, number 1 source of illness is malnutrition. And it's a terrible death. Starvation is a terrible way to go. So it is drilled into us that less is bad and more is always better. Open your closets, open your cupboards. You have between 10 and 100x more than what you need. And you know rationally it makes no sense. You look in your closet and think, rationally, do I need more apparel? Do I need more? I'm out there, immediately I'm drawn to those desks out there selling all the Cal stuff. I have a lot of Cal stuff in my closet. But I need more. The consumptive self, Amazon is our large intestine taking in nutrients and then distributing them to our cardiovascular and our consumer skeletal system. But more for less has been the best business strategy in the history of business. It's the strategy of the Chinese economy. It's the strategy of Walmart, the strategy of Dell, and now the company that is deploying this strategy more efficiently than anybody else is Amazon. More for less always works because it is baked into us. You always need more, no matter how much you have. Moving further down the torso. Number 1 instinct, survival. Most of you, actually probably all of you, got up this morning and that box was checked. Very few of us, none of us here today are physically worried about surviving through the end of the day. So survival in a modern economy, and despite all the headline news and the situation room, and if it bleeds, it leads, the chances of you dying at the hands of another human being are less than they have been today than through all of history. So for most people in our modern world, the threat of survival is not an immediate threat. So that instinct doesn't need to kick in. So we immediately progress to the second most powerful instinct, and that's procreation. And the constant need to signal good genes is incredibly powerful. This is not a timepiece. I haven't wound it in 5 years. It's an $11,000 item that costs $1,800 to produce, movements, steel, glass, plastic, that I wear so I can signal to potential mates that if you mate with me, your kids are more likely to survive than if you mate with someone wearing a swatch. And we like to think that with graduate degrees and subscriptions to the New York Times, that we're not that base. But if you show me an incredibly high-margin consumer product, I'm going to show you a product that is signaling to potential mates that you have good genes. So just as paying for dinner with a Discover card or having ad-supported Pandora is like saying, I have bad genes, don't mate with me. The new signal that you are a good mate is this. Samsung makes a better phone, but this says you are part of the innovation class. It says you are wealthy, you can afford an $800, $1,000, a $1,200 phone. It says you're more educated. It says you're part of the creative class. It says you're interesting, elegant, and you have good genes. This is the new signal of your worthiness as a mate. It's a luxury item. You want to appeal to the most irrational instincts. A high-caloric paste that is good for your children and is nutritious. That's appealing to the brain. You want to appeal to the heart. The businesses that created more shareholder value between World War II and the introduction of Google appealed to the heart, specifically CPG brands that took powders, solvents, and soaps and turned them into love. This high-caloric paste is good for your kids. Well, okay. No, if you give this high-caloric paste to your children, you love them more. This is a way of saying how much you love your children. Why? Because choosy moms choose Jif. And we take 40 cents worth of peanut butter and we turn it into something worth $3. We take a soap and it means European elegance. And my mentor and a professor here who literally changed my life kind of taught the world that the intangible associations wrapped around a mediocre product were the way to create shareholder value or above-market shareholder value. And that was the algorithm for creating value, was appealing to the heart. Last 30 years, best business, most people would immediately default to technology. But we romanticize technology companies, and on a risk-adjusted basis, the better business has actually been luxury, appealing to our procreation instinct. 400 wealthiest people in the world, the Forbes 400, if you take out inherited wealth and finance, there's more people on that list from retail and luxury. Wealthiest man in Europe, Bernard Arnault, making you feel better about signaling your attractiveness as a mate with ridiculously expensive products. Number 2 and 3 are the founders of H&M and Zara. Again, all about being an attractive mate. And by the way, even if you are in a monogamous relationship and don't want to mate with others, you still want a Ferrari. You still want to wear La Perla undergarments. Because that need to feel more attractive and signal your worthiness as a mate never goes away fully. And you want to appeal to that very irrational instinct because irrational decisions translate to margins and shareholder value. These 4 companies have disarticulated who we are as people. God, love, consumption, and sex. Your approach to those 4 things, the proportion of them in your life, is literally who you are as a person. And these companies have disarticulated who you are and reassembled them in the form of for-profit companies. And the wealth creation is staggering. The end of the recession, 2008, the combined market capitalization of these 4 companies was equivalent to the GDP of Niger. Now it has blown back the GDP of Canada, the GDP of Russia, and has a combined market capitalization equivalent to the GDP of India. Or put another way, there's only 5 nations or 6 nations in the world that have a greater GDP than the combined market capitalization of these 4 firms. And I believe, other than China and the US, these 4 firms have more influence on our society than any entities in the world right now. Let's talk about Google. There's only 13 companies that have outperformed the S&P 500 5 years in a row. Think about that. 500 companies and only 2%, have been able to outperform the average gains 5 years in a row, which one indicates that we become a winner-take-all company. There's a small number of companies driving extraordinary shareholder gains. But what's interesting is to look at what these 13 companies have in common. And the analysis or the observation I would make is that 9 of them are what I would refer to as Benjamin Button companies. And that is they have figured out a way to age in reverse. The economic titans of yesteryear, General Motors and Colgate-Palmolive, the moment a car rolled off the assembly line, the moment you screwed the top off a tube of toothpaste, the value of that company began aging similar to the way we age biologically. And they declined 20 to 95% upon the first usage. These companies have figured out a way, mostly through network effects, such that they age in reverse. By the way, Benjamin Button is a wonderful story with F. Scott Fitzgerald about a father who loses his son in war and builds a clock to try and turn back time. And the companies that are adding the most shareholder value in our economy have figured out a way to suspend the natural order of economics. And when I turn on Waze to get home tonight, the GPS ping to my phone will inform anybody else using Waze and make it better. When I search on Google, if I'm one of the 3 billion people that will search on Google today, and I type in hotel in Los Angeles, hip hotel in Los Angeles, whatever content I select will inform the next search of a similar topic, helping them get to the best, most salient, relevant data. And it's aging in reverse and getting better through usage. 9 of the 13 companies that outperform the S&P have this Benjamin Button-like network effect at their core. 2 of them are outsourcing firms, and 2 of them are infrastructure companies serving Benjamin Button companies. So right now, the companies that are outperforming the marketplace are either reverse the aging process or in palliative care outsourcing costs for companies that are now in structural decline and dying. There's only one brand on here, Under Armour, and that's off the list after their stock performance the last 12 months. But if you had done the same analysis every 10 years since the end of World War II, it would have been littered with brands. And what I'm here to tell you is that the way I've made my living, preaching a mediocre product wrapped in fantastic associations, what we think of as a traditional brand-building strategy, the sun has passed midday on that strategy. And at Stern, I don't know about the marketing curriculum here, but most marketing curriculums at business schools are teaching kids a mediocre product, outstanding brand associations, so they can get a job at General Mills and be laid off 3 years later. Pity a media company that's not Google. Google's products get better every year, and they cut their costs every year. The cost per click on Google year on year last year was down 11%, mostly because mobile ads are cheaper. But you wake up and you're a TV company and you say, okay, I'm competing against Google for ad dollars. Did their products get better? Yeah, they got massively better. And what about pricing? Well, they lowered their prices 11%. That's a tough competitor. In the consumer world, the general feeling at board levels is an indication of your strength is your ability to raise prices faster than inflation. Don't cut your prices. Technology has upended the world or the economic viewpoint or how companies approach strategy because the general gestalt among technology companies is let's massively improve the product this year and let's cut the price. So as a result, technology continues to eat more and more GDP of our economy. Search, which Google controls 90-plus points of share of now in most markets, is a bigger market by dollar volume than the entire advertising market of any country with the exception of the US. Kids come to my office hours, they want to talk about industries, and they say, I'm going into digital marketing. I'm like, that's great, as long as you work for one of 2 companies. Google and Facebook are now responsible for 103% of the growth in digital marketing. So if you're working for a video ad optimization platform or a CRM data mining company, you're in digital marketing, but you don't work for Facebook or Google, you join newspapers and magazines in that you are in an industry in structural decline. Facebook. Facebook's the most successful thing in the history of mankind. There are now about 2.2 billion people on the planet that have a meaningful relationship with Facebook. That's more people than have a meaningful relationship with any specific god, any specific capitalism or communist system. Facebook is the most successful thing in the history of mankind. And if someone has an entity or a concept, a man-made thing that has a relationship with more people, I'd love to hear about it after the talk. The only thing I can figure out that's in the running is soccer. There's about 3 billion fans globally. I'm serious. 3 billion people have a meaningful relationship with soccer. But right now, as far as I can tell, Facebook is the most successful thing in the history of mankind. 80% of your time on this is in-app. Not this, it's in-app. And 6 of the 10 most popular apps globally are owned by one company, Facebook. This isn't a communications device. It's the utility for delivering Facebook. Millennials, if patterns hold, will spend 2.5 years of the remainder of their life on this planet on a Facebook app. 2.5 years of their life on a Facebook app. We were hoping Snapchat would be the Facebook of video. We need a third player in this duopoly. That would be good for the ecosystem, a lot of potential from Snap. Snap was going to be the Facebook of video. The Facebook of video is Facebook. Specifically, Instagram stories. And what we've looked at Stern, when you look at similar content on Snap from the same brand and you put it on Instagram stories, it's getting 10 to 15x the reach. So Facebook is literally putting Snap out of business. I believe the first thing that Mark Zuckerberg thinks when he wakes up in the morning is must wipe Snap from the face of the planet. And then the last thing he thinks when he closes his eyes at night is must wipe Snap from the face of the planet. Facebook is now incorporating Snap-like features across everything they do, even where it makes no sense. And you know what? They're winning. So prediction, I love predictions. Snap is going to fall under $10 a share, and then Google is going to buy them. Mark Zuckerberg's hatred of Evan Spiegel is going to put Evan into the arms of Google. Apple. Remember we were talking about irrational decision-making, specifically around appealing to people's desire to procreate? The result is Apple now has operating profits somewhere between the operating profits of Ferrari and Hermes. We've never seen that before in a hardware company. Why? Because we want to signal we have good genes and we will pay an irrational premium for things that do that. The result is the most profitable company in history. Apple will do double the profits this quarter than Amazon has done in its entire history as a company. It does more profits than the combined profits of the other three. It does more profits than Toyota, Walmart, P&G, and Unilever combined, and it does about the same profits as Microsoft, IBM, Oracle, and Intel combined. Apple has achieved the impossible in business. In business school, we're taught you can either be the low-cost leader and pass on those cost savings to consumers, or you can be the premium price product and own a niche. Apple has done both. Their new phones, the iPhone 8 and the iPhone 10, will be the most popular phones in the world. So they are able to leverage that popularity in the supply chain and secure components at the lowest price of any telco manufacturer or telephone handset company. At the same time, they're the premium priced product. So the auto equivalent of an Apple would be an auto company that was able to charge $280,000, like Ferrari for a car, but had the production volumes of Toyota. That is literally what we have with Apple, and as a result, we have the most profitable company by a long shot in the history of modern business, a company that has more cash on its balance sheet now than the GDP of many Northern European nations. So then it goes, well, how have they been able to do that? They've been able to create this brand that means good genes. That's an amazing feat. How have they been able to do this? And that's what we talk about in marketing courses. How has Apple, the most powerful brand in the world that's created the most profitability in the history of modern business with this brand equity, been able to pull this off? What's different about what they've done? And you immediately leap to, they must be spending a lot of money on advertising, because that's how you build brands, right? On a dollar-adjusted basis, adjusting for top-line income, they spend half of what Samsung spends on advertising. And they think, well, they're smarter. They're spending it on online advertising, search, and banner advertising. No, they're not. They spend less than Samsung. So what has Apple done with the billions of dollars that Samsung is spending on advertising that they're not to create the strongest brand in the world? And the answer is Steve Jobs went into his board and asked them to spend billions of dollars on something that was dying and made no sense. And this was probably the most interesting, genius move, unexpected move that has created more shareholder value than any decision in modern business. And that was Steve Jobs decided to take billions of dollars and open these things that were dying called stores. Why? The Valerium steel of pre-purchase broadcast advertising, how brands have traditionally built brands, is getting duller and duller. Why? Young people no longer watch ad-supported television. Advertising, and again, I've made a really nice living preaching about brand equity. Advertising has become the tax that the poor and the technologically illiterate pay. How do you know you're wealthy? You get to opt out of advertising. What media is growing? Netflix and HBO. What's common among them? No advertising. How many of you watch 21 minutes of Modern Family for $2.99 instead of 30 minutes of Modern Family, including 9 minutes of ads off of ABC.com? ABC is only able to get 40 cents from advertisers for making you endure 9 minutes of ads, so technology is letting you opt out and say, not only will I pay 40 cents, I'll pay $2.99. I'm opting out. In Paris, it's the law that you cannot see an ad from a green space. Wealth means an absence from advertising. Why? Because advertising sucks. It's awful. I watched 30 minutes of broadcast TV last night, and I find out that I must be in the market for a South Korean car, a light beer, and I have opioid-induced constipation. None of which, fortunately, have any relevance in my life right now. But we have this dumb box on top of our TV called a set-top box that's there because the television industry, similar to tobacco, was paid not to understand things. And advertisers didn't want to know or couldn't know from set-top or from broadcast television what was actually going on because they would have figured out which 90 or 95% of their ads were being served to irrelevant consumers for them. And it would have caused just a crash in advertising. So the TV or the advertising industrial complex has been paid not to understand who they're reaching. And as a result, we have advertising that has become just awful and irrelevant across broadcast media. Amazon. If I were going to write a sequel to this book called The One, it would be Amazon. Amazon, I believe right now, at least as long as I've been thinking about business, is performing or firing on all 12,000 cylinders at a rate I've never seen a company perform. Everywhere Amazon is bumping up against the other companies, it's winning. In search, product search is a small but valuable part of search. Amazon had 44% share in 2015. By 2016, it had grown to 55%. They've added Sears, Macy's, and Nordstrom to their top line in the last 7 years. 44% of Americans own a gun, or 44% of American households have a gun. 49% of households have a landline phone. 51% attend church monthly. By the way, I think these are the same people. That's a geography test. I can close my eyes and tell that joke, and based on the response, I know where I am. So when I'm home as a progressive in Europe or on the coast, I get a big laugh. On Tuesday, I'll be in Bentonville, I'll tell the same joke, and I'll get this. Literally, you'll just cross an arm, look at me, and somebody go, well, he's from NYU, right? 55% earn over $50,000. 55% of U.S. households voted in the 2016 election, and 58% have a relationship with Prime. More people have Prime than voted in the election or have a landline phone. If current trends hold, in 3 years, there's going to be more people with a cable pipe of stuff into their household than cable television. Think about that. Who would have thought that the ultimate manifestation of technology would be that households have this relationship with a company that gets them the stuff they need to their gut within 2 days, 1 day, 45 minutes with Amazon Now or Prime Now, and 78% decorate a Christmas tree. Prime Day within 5 to 7 years will probably be the second biggest shopping day of the year behind Christmas. Kids come to my office hours. Again, they don't want to talk about brand strategy or digital marketing, the courses I teach. They want to talk about careers. And the largest recruiter at Stern now is Amazon. I'd be shocked if it wasn't the largest recruiter here. And they come in and they say, I have an offer from X, Y, Z. The good kids at Stern get somewhere between 7 and 11 offers. And I love X and I love Y, and oh, and I also have an offer from Amazon, and my fiance lives next door to this offer from this company. I'm like, we can go through this navel-gazing and hand-wringing if you want, or we can skip to the part, which is the following. Young people don't have the self-awareness to think about what's really important in their lives, so they defer to what they believe society wants them to do. And society is telling you to go to work for Amazon. So you're going to Seattle, and we can sit here and we can go through all this angst, but you're going to Seattle, so let's stop this. And I believe they have somewhere between a 90 and 95% yield on offers right now, meaning that basically anyone who gets an offer out of business school from Amazon goes to work there, at least at Stern. Why? They're generating $1.2 million in shareholder value for every incremental employee. Macy's is generating $62,000, Walmart's generating $96,000. So what you will never hear at Amazon is, we really wanted this person, but they were too expensive. You actually never hear that at Google now either. The Big Four have such an advantage around capital that they literally lose nobody because of economics, because they are generating so much shareholder value for every individual they are able to sign up. I love this meme. I bet most of you have seen this. But look at, isn't he cute? Don't you just want to pet him in 1998? Isn't he cute? He looks like a puppy, doesn't he? Fast forward. Can you get over how jacked this guy is? Most innovative hardware product of 2015 and 16, was it the Apple Watch, the Apple Pods? No, it was Amazon's Echo. Where do they compete against Google and Facebook? Digital marketing. Amazon Media Group is now $1.5 billion and growing faster than Google and soon Facebook. Triple the size of Snap, it'll be bigger than Twitter. No one talks about Amazon as a media company. It's one of the fastest growing and now becoming one of the 10 largest media companies in the world. So how is Amazon able to do this? Amazon has achieved something, again, no one's achieved in the history of mankind or the history of companies, and that is they've convinced the marketplace to bid up their stock to be the most valuable company or the fourth most valuable company in the world, $500 billion in value, and effectively no profits. So they invest 100 cents on the dollar back in the consumer experience, whereas most companies can invest 70 or 80 cents on the dollar. And I'm a war buff. At the end of World War II, or towards the end of World War II, the Germans had better tanks, better machinery. We don't like to talk about this, but they had better morale and better officers, better trained officers. But the Allies had 38 gallons of gasoline for every one they had because we had cut off their supply routes. So if we got into a field with one of their tanks, we would just literally drive around the tanks until they ran out of gas with our inferior Bradley tanks. We wouldn't even engage them in battle. We would just play over here, and then we'd surround it with more tanks. And they would run out of gas, and then we'd take a hammer and start banging on it until it became impossible to endure for the people inside the tanks, and they'd come out, and we would either kill them or take them prisoner. Amazon is the business that shows up with 38 gallons of gasoline. They can literally overwhelm any sector they go into with sheer brute force. They're spending more on R&D than any other tech company. They're going into non-core categories. They're number one in the fastest growing, most profitable portion of tech right now, cloud. It's not their core business, but they're number one, triple the market share of the next largest provider. In 2015, they had a 2% share of streaming video during primetime hours. Just 1 year later, they're number three. This is old data. Facebook and Apple spending $1 billion. HBO spends $2.5 billion. ABC and NBC spend about $3 to $4 billion. Amazon just announced this year they're going to spend $4.5 billion on original content. Netflix has upped its budget to $8 billion because they hear Amazon's footsteps behind them. Amazon is the number 2 spender on original scripted television content now. Who would have thought 5 years ago Amazon would be the second largest investor in television content? They're going into non-core areas and showing up with 38 gallons of gasoline. Why? They have almost infinite capital because we don't demand yet profits of them. Advertising, or the advertising industrial complex or broadcast TV at the upfront, so it says the same thing. Yeah, but we have live sports. That's the last firewall, the advertising industrial complex. Well, I'll tell you what, that wall is crumbling. If you take sports away from the networks, you're seeing a plummeting in their viewership. And by the way, young people, I love coming up with metrics for what I believe are success or how to live a successful life. And one of the metrics I tell my kids is the ratio of time you spend sweating to watching other people sweat is an indicator of your success. That sport viewership is, other than Cal football, is not a great way to spend your life. So if you're going to spend 3 hours watching the game today, you need to spend 3.5 or 4 exercising this week. And I think young people have figured this out. And the viewership of sports is accelerating, which is a very negative forward-looking indicator. And by the way, it doesn't matter, because in a matter of time, the Big Four are going to buy all the big sporting events. March Madness, the Super Bowl, the World Cup are all going to go to Apple, Amazon, Facebook, or Google. There's no loyalty with these leagues with any station. It just goes to the highest bidder. And it's going to go to the deepest pocketed company, which is now these 4. Pity Walmart, who added $140 billion in top-line revenue, and the markets rewarded it with $36 billion in additional shareholder value. Amazon's added $120 billion in its top line since 2007, and the market has given it an incremental $500 billion in value. Amazon can now access the credit markets for a lower cost than China. That's how much faith we have in Amazon and their future. This is the worst thing to happen to brands since World War II. CPG firms have spent billions of dollars and decades mastering eye-level design, packaging, colors that release norepinephrine, weather monitoring, taking prices of beer up or down, end caps with Tom Brady, buy Bud Light. All of that goes away. All of those levers disappear with voice. 1/3 of all searches and computing within 3 years will not involve a screen. It'll involve a voice. And the buttery voice of Alexa has 2/3 share in the home right now, which I believe is the new battleground. This has been the battleground for the last 10 years with trillions of dollars in stake. The new battleground is going to be in our home, which is the only place we don't carry this around, and it's going to be around voice. And Alexa is winning. What happens when you ask Alexa for batteries? It makes 2 choices. Amazon Basics, their private label brands, and then it's out of ideas. Even though, if you go on the platform, there are dozens of other battery brands. Because Alexa can have a selective memory because it knows you're not at a shelf looking at all the brands available. Even Tide, which has better user reviews and a lower price, Presto still gets the nod from Alexa because Presto is the private label brand of Amazon. Something big has happened in the last, even I would say the last 90 days, and that is the worm has turned on technology. The biggest argument before was which CEO was most Christ-like or going to run for president. And now we have had it with these companies, largely because of the weaponization of these platforms by Russia. There's some disturbing stats that I think warrant a conversation. The first is Walmart, since the Great Recession, has paid $64 billion in corporate income tax. Amazon has paid $1.4 billion, despite the fact that in that same time, Amazon has added the entire value of Walmart to its market capitalization in the last 21 months. So the question is, if the most successful companies in the world don't pay taxes, how do we pay our firefighters, build our roads, or support our soldiers? And the answer is simple. It means you have to tax more the less successful companies. Alexa, is this a good thing? Incredible job destruction. This year, Facebook and Google will add $22 billion in top-line revenue. They need 14,000 people to service that revenue. Traditional media companies would need 137,000 people to service $22 billion in media. Media right now is a flat business. It's not growing, which, by my math, says that 137,000 agency executives, creatives, copywriters, designers are going to fill up 2.5 Yankee stadiums every year and be given their pink slips by Facebook or Google. And I find it wildly ironic that when I'm at Cannes, this agora of all media executives, that the most sought-after ticket is to listen to Sheryl Sandberg, who I think is an inspiring woman, talk about leaning in and about gender politics at the workplace. I find it ironic that I believe somewhere between 10 and 20% of the women in that room are about to be laid off by Facebook. And my question is gender politics really going to be at the forefront of your mind when you're laid off? We're getting half our news from social media platforms, and about 40% of the news coming off these platforms is fake news. Can you put your hands in your ears for just a moment? Put your hands in your ears. So I am told never to make sexist comments, never to curse, never to talk about politics. I signed something at NYU. I've had to sign something at NYU saying, well, I will not say these things. So I am definitely not going to say that Mark Zuckerberg has become Putin's bitch. I'm just not going to say it. You can take him out. But wait, Facebook's not a media company. It's a technology company, right? We're not a media company. Facebook defines what it is to be a media company. You spend $1 billion on original content. You're spending money with sports agencies to produce original content. 50% of news is received from you, and you run advertising at 90+% gross margins. Boom, you're a media company. Facebook has warmly embraced the celebrity, the influence, and the economics of a media company, but seems to be allergic to the responsibilities of the fourth estate. That's like McDonald's serving 80% of its beef as fake beef, and we start getting encephalitis from this fake beef and making really bad decisions. And we get mad at McDonald's, and McDonald's says, whoa, hold on. We're not a fast food restaurant. We're a fast food platform. I believe these four firms wrap themselves in a neon rainbow and blue blanket to create an illusionist trick. Why? Because we progressives are largely thought of as nice but weak. We're cute and harmless. We're trying to save the world, but we're sort of not smart enough to really get anything done. That's the general impression of progressives. And when conservatives were running the most powerful company in the world, Microsoft, in the 90s, regulators moved in, because the idea of a smart and mean person running a company this powerful is frightening to all of us. But not these guys. They're impossible not to like. If Sheryl Sandberg believed in gun rights and was pro-life, would Facebook be flying her around the world to talk about her political views? Would they be as open about the first openly gay CEO? I think Tim Cook is impossible not to like. And I'm not questioning their principles. I generally think they're good people who have, that these are their ideas. But promoting their progressive values publicly foots really well to shareholder value because it creates cheap clothing around companies that during business hours act more like this. I'll fly tomorrow. I'll be molested by a guy named Roy in TSA. If I'm suspected of a DUI driving home tonight, I can be strapped to a chair and have bodily fluid taken from my person. But if a terrorist uses this and kills 13 people, and the FBI says, you know what, we're pretty worried. We're concerned about other acts of terror unfolding. We would really like to get into that phone. And they get an FBI-mandated court order from a court. Apple says, we're taking a stand for privacy, and we're refusing or challenging the court order. Now, distinct of what you think of privacy, what I would offer is the following. What if the terrorist had been carrying a BlackBerry? And RIM out of Waterloo, Canada had said, we're taking a stand for privacy, and we're not going to let the FBI into this phone. I would put forward that within a couple days, we would have legislation on the floor of Congress to enact a trade embargo against Canada. But not the iPhone. This is our new cross. We have our religion, it's Apple. We have our Jesus Christ, it's Steve Jobs. And our new cross is the iPhone. I believe we are engaging in a gross idolatry of youth and innovation that has perverted our perspective on what these companies actually do. And I think we are far too reverent and forgiving of them. It's so good to be home in Berkeley. That usually does not go over well. Amazon can do Jedi mind tricks. It can take the value of any consumer company now just by wanting pain on it. When they announced the acquisition of Whole Foods, between the time they announced the acquisition, between the time it closes, Kroger's the largest pure-play grocer in America, loses a third of its value. This is because Amazon bought a company that is 1/11th the size of Kroger. I believe Amazon could take the value of any consumer company in America down by 30% within 60 days just with press releases. So this is me boasting. I luckily predicted the acquisition of Whole Foods by Amazon the week before it happened. Do we have sound? Or at Wegmans, is they have not figured out.
I still believe they're going to buy a Macy's or a Carrefour or something like that. I can't imagine why they wouldn't buy Whole Foods, for example.
So people say, a lot of people called me, including some scary agencies, and said, how did you know this? And I said, I just got lucky. But I'm here to tell you how I knew Amazon was going to buy Whole Foods. I do a lot of experimentation with Alexa, and this is what I yelled at Alexa one day. Alexa, buy whole milk.
I couldn't find anything for whole milk, so I've added whole milk to your shopping list.
Alexa, buy organic foods.
The top search result for organic food is Plum Organics baby food, banana, and pumpkin, 12-pack of 4 ounces each. It's $15 total. Would you like to buy it?
And then I got confused and barked the following. Alexa, buy Whole Foods.
I have purchased the outstanding stock of Whole Foods Incorporated at $42 per share. I have charged $13.7 billion to your American Express card.
Okay. So I'm gonna wrap up here. These are my last slides. We have personified these companies, and we're effectively in a relationship. It feels as if we're in a relationship with these companies. And lately, we're angry at them, and we get mad at everything they do. And just as when you leave the garage door opening and your spouse or your partner gets really angry at you for that, it's fair to ask, okay, what's going on here? What are you really upset about? What's going on here? And I believe as we get angry at these companies for everything they do right now, it's fair to say, what's going on here? Why are we so upset at big tech? And I think it's the following. I think the ratio of the benefits of big tech have gone from 1% the pursuit of shareholder value and 99% the betterment of humanity. And I think slowly but surely, that ratio has flipped to 1% the betterment of humanity and 99% the pursuit of shareholder value. In 1942, the Manhattan Project brought together 100,000 Americans in a foot race against Hitler to get to who could split the atom first. And we were using paper and pencils to try and figure this out. And we saved the world. I mean, literally saved the world with this technology. My mother, in 1939, at the outbreak of the war, was a 4-year-old Jew living in London. If we hadn't won that race, I wouldn't be here. A strip of ocean, the brains, brawn, and blood of Britain, US, and Russia, and technology saved her life. 25 years later, most impressive feat of mankind to that point, 400,000 Canadians, Brits, and Americans came together to accomplish the impossible using fairly basic technologies and put a man on the moon. Still probably the most remarkable achievement given where we were at that time. And now where are we? We have 700,000 of the best and brightest working for these 4 companies. I work with all of them. They're extraordinary people. And we draw on them not from Canada, Britain, and the US. We draw on them from the 4 corners of the earth. We have literally brought together the greatest assembly of IQ in the history of mankind at these 4 firms. They are working with lasers relative to the squirt guns and slingshots that the Manhattan and NASA projects we're working with. And after studying these companies for 10 years, I believe I have figured out why they have come together, what their mission is. Is it to create a greater comity of man? Is it to solve world hunger? Is it to facilitate a dialogue that makes us less likely to commit acts of violence against each other? I don't think so. I'm convinced that the greatest assembly of creativity, IQ, and capital is here to sell another Nissan. And I think it's hugely disappointing. I appreciate your time.